This might be the hardest book tag I've ever been tagged in, but let's jump into it. I think I'm okay with my answers. I don't know, but let's go through Beauty and the Books. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel. Hello, if you are new. I was very kindly tagged by a beautiful creator here on BookTube. Her name is Emily Clarice Pessoa. She is phenomenal, buttery voiced, wonderful human being, so sweet, so impassioned. Love her. Love her. I love that she's here. Okay. She's a newer booktuber. Go subscribe to her. I love her stuff. She and another creator whose name is escaping me right now, and I will flash it on the screen if I can recall it, created a book tag called Beauty in the Books. And it's got, I don't know how many prompts it's got, 6, 7 prompts. And they're all about beauty in books, different ways a book is beautiful. And why I think this is a very difficult book tag is that it's very hard to pick one thing. I have like stared at my shelves, I've combed through my bookly, I've scratched my head, and I think I'm okay with the answers I have here, I think. But I found it nearly impossible to pick one book for a lot of these categories. So unfortunately, I'm going to cheat a bit in this, and I hope that everyone forgives me for that, because like I say, it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. So let's go. The first prompt is beauty in concept. I have a lot of things here because I do like a weirder book, a fragmented book. I like when a book tries something. That doesn't mean I always like the book, but I do appreciate when an author tries to play with form, how they want to narrate a book, perspective, something. And these really worked for me. I'll start with The Employees by Olga Rev. I can't say her name. This is a really interesting sci-fi, like it's very slim little sci-fi, and it's told in these fragmented employee interviews. And it's so weird to read this book because something has happened in this spaceship and you're getting pieces of it through these interviews, and at first you're like, what the fuck is going on? And then you keep going and you keep going and you just keep reading them because you're like, I need to know what's going on in this spaceship, because like everyone comes in and keeps saying something and you're like, but like what? And I just thought it was a really interesting way to tell a story, to go from what the fuck to I'm totally committed to this and I need to know what's happening, is such a fun ride to go on in a book. And I just really enjoyed this. And I don't think that I've read anything quite like this before. So it was really new and novel for me. I also wanted to include The Alphabetical Diaries by Sheila Heti because I just felt like it was a unique way to structure sort of a memoir. She took 10 years of, I really think it's 10 years. I could be wrong. I keep saying 10 years, so I'm going to commit to this bit that it's 10 years worth of diary entries and sorted them by the first letter of the first word in each sentence, and then broke it out alphabetically from there. So there's an A chapter, a B chapter, and everything is in alphabetical order. And what that does is it creates interesting connections between things in her life. The mundane can become almost profound. At times in there, you can see these just very bad patterns that she has with men. And you kind of want to be like, Sheila, what are you doing? You just kind of want to like be like, I think you need to date other people. Like, what are you doing? I found it really interesting. I don't know if everybody could pull it off, but I really enjoyed it. I don't think I'd want to read another book quite like that, but I enjoyed it. And then finally, I have Sphinx by Anne Garretta, which is a novel that's in the Aleppo style. I feel bad if Sophie's watching this and I'm just butchering French. I really loved this. This has been accepted into this group of experimental French writers who basically do weird things with books. Like they will write an entire book without the letter E. And Anne Garretta writes an entire book without using gender, which in French, which I wish I could read it in French, is a very interesting thing to do, the way the French language works, especially interesting in a language that has gendered terms. It's a little easier in some ways, I think, In English, we just really have pronouns and that's about it. So it's kind of a cheat to have it in English, I feel like, in some ways, but it also is, difficult then for the translator to create the same sense that you get while reading it in French, because we have those differences in the way our languages are structured. But anyway, it is fascinating. It's a fascinating book to read. It's a really interesting experience. It's unforgettable because you start to gender the characters yourself. Like, it's really hard for your brain to not gender the characters. And I would find it very interesting to see what, like, a younger person who has lived more in a world where gender is more fluid. I grew up in a very binary world. So in this very binary world, my brain just wants to assign genders to things, especially in a story that has like a love story to it. But would a younger person who has grown up with more gender fluid ideas, would they still feel that pull, that compulsion to gender the characters? I don't know. It would be interesting to ask like a Gen Alpha person to read this book and tell me what they experienced. Those were like the three that I could probably come up with more, but those were like the big three that I kind of wanted to highlight, because it's hard to pick like one conceptual kind of book that is just like beautiful. And I would recommend you read all three of these. I think that they're so interesting. They're just interesting books for different reasons. Next is Beauty in an Opening Line. I didn't pull books for this. I'm very ill-prepared. But luckily this book is almost always at hand. So I of course picked Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, because this is my favorite book of all times. And I think it's got one of the most memorable intros. Probably for me, next to Pride and Prejudice. So I'll read you the first paragraph. Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. It seemed to me I stood by the iron gate leading to the drive, and for a while I could not enter, for the way was barred to me. There was a padlock and a chain upon the gate. I called in my dream to the lodge-keeper, and had no answer. And peering closer through the rusted spokes of the gate, I saw that the lodge was uninhabited. And then it goes on from there. And I love this book. Like, what an atmospheric read. I think I'm going to reread this in October. Maybe for like my birthday, I'll reread it. This is one of my many, many editions of Rebecca. I really like this one. It's truly stunning. And this one says it's copyright 1938. So one of my favorite editions. I have lots of editions. I collect editions of Rebecca. But yeah, that's my answer for that. That one was easy. I got one for you. Beauty in Character. This feels like a bit of a cheat, but I picked Pride and Prejudice because I just feel like those characters are so timeless and relatable in times, and they live inside of so many of us, I feel like. And to think that it's over like 200 years or something insane like that, and these characters are still so much a part of our world and how we escape and how we think and talk about relationships, and the humor is still relatable and funny today. And yes, there's details that are lost to time. So you would get more out of a Jane Austen novel, particularly Pride and Prejudice. I think if you were a person of the time, there's still more humor. There's still more like witticisms and stuff that go over like maybe the average reader's head, but it's still readable. It's still relatable. It's still gonna make you laugh. It's still gonna make you feel things. It's still just wonderful. I love Pride and Prejudice, and the characters in them are like, they're like family at this point. I've read and watched adaptations of this book so many times from like a young age that they are like a part of me. So yeah, I had to pick that for Beauty in Character. Beauty Amidst Pain. I chose Betty by Tiffany McDaniel because, I mean, there's a reading vlog for this on the channel if you want to watch me ugly cry on the internet for like an hour. This book, tabbed like crazy. There is so much trauma and pain in Betty, but there's also this really beautiful relationship between Betty and her father, and he is such a good dad. And I was constantly cycling between just the trauma pain of what happens to Betty and her family and her poor mom and her siblings and everything, and then the beautiful things that her dad says to her, and the beautiful relationship she has with her father, and that just Oh, it's so good. It's so freaking good. And so like that would have like he would have me crying, and then I I would be crying from the tragic stuff. I have like two kinds of tabs in here. You can't see that because it's written in pencil, but pink and yellow are for beautiful passages, and then blue and gray are for truly truly tragic moments, is what it says. I'll try not to read any of the really ones, the bad ones. All right, I think this is something her dad says. Yeah, her dad says, the first woman was given antlers on her head to branch her power out into the world, he said, digging the rake in deeper. Slugs are frightened of that power because they are spineless creatures, and all spineless creatures are frightened of a woman's power. Like, what a nice thing for your dad to say to you. Did you not feel empowered as a woman if your dad said that to you? But then really horrible things happen. Like you turn a page and then it's like just horrible things. Like it's just like tragic event upon tragic event upon tragic event. It's so bad. Some little girls grow up with fathers who are decent, kind, and tenderly nested by their daughter's heart. Other little girls grow up with no father at all, thus ignorant of good men and the not so good ones. The unluckiest of all little girls grow up with fathers who know how to make storms out of sunshine and blue skies. My mother was one such unlucky girl and suffered the childhood you run away from, except if you have nowhere to run to. But Betty doesn't have that because Betty has the best dad ever. I love this book. Next is Beauty in Incompleteness. And as I understand this prompt, this is a book that is not complete, or maybe it has been completed by somebody else but wasn't completed by the author. And I literally Googled which books that might be because I could not think of anything that I have read that qualifies as that, because I haven't read like Sanditon or the Watsons yet. So Jane Austen's out. But you know what I did? I did have The Buccaneers by Edith Wharton. I love The Buccaneers. This is a great book. And this is finished by Marion Mainwaring, this guy, this person. And I love this story, and it's one of my first, I think this is like the first Edith Wharton I ever read as a young girl, because there was a really lovely BBC miniseries that was made about it, and then I of course got it and I read it as a younger girl. And this is essentially the story of three rich American women. I think two of them are sisters. I don't think they're all sisters. And they are $1 million heiresses. They go to the US from the US to the UK to marry a titled man. They had no money. They needed a cash injection. They had no status or titles, but they had all the money. So they would make these alliances. I mean, that's how we got Winston Churchill, as his mom was $1 million heiress. And it's just an interesting story. I really enjoy this. I like Wharton's writing. I do need to read this again. I haven't read this since I was a young girl. So this prompt reminded me that I do need to read this. And the closer we get to the end of the year, I think next year's year with an author, I might do Edith Wharton. Also because her house is in Lenox, Massachusetts. Lenox, Massachusetts is only about an hour or two from me. So we could conceivably go there in the spring, summer when it's open, and also get a little historical moment too. But anyway, so that is Beauty in Incompleteness. I was going to be a very moody teenager me and read Kubla Khan for you, but we're going to skip Emo Alyssa. Next is Beauty in Place, and I picked Against the Loveless World by Susan Abul Hawa. Oh, I've definitely said that wrong. We read this earlier in the year with Patreon, and I love this book. It's like all the way at the top of my bookshelves, and my bookshelves go like very high up. I'm not getting a ladder out for this. This book is phenomenal, and I put in little parentheses that this isn't just Beauty in Place. This is Beauty in Place and Displacement. So this is following a young woman, and I think she's first in Kuwait, and then she goes to Jordan, or it's Jordan then Kuwait. But anyway, she is a Palestinian woman that has never lived in Palestine because her parents had to flee Palestine. I think she goes from Jordan to Kuwait to Palestine, but it is very rooted in place, and it is very much about place, and it is also very much about displacement. She ends up becoming a rebel person, depending on what way you want to look, what lens you want to view her through. She's either a terrorist or she is a freedom fighter. I choose to see her as a freedom fighter when she finally does return to Palestine, and we alternate between her telling her story growing up and how we got to this place, and her in this incredibly inhumane prison cell, being held as a prisoner by the Israeli government. And it is such a good book. It talks so much about who has right to place. I just love it. I think everyone should read it. It has a very bittersweet ending. It is going to be quite an emotional ride for you all if you choose to read it, but I love it and I think it fits very nicely into this prompt. Next up is Beauty in Time, and my number one pick for time is Mrs. Dalloway, because throughout this whole story, this is my beautiful annotated edition my friend Naomi sent me for my birthday one year. Time is such a heavy thread in this entire novel. You hear the tolling of Big Ben throughout the entire novel. You are spending one day with Clarissa as she's preparing for this party, and she has this party, but it's not just about the present time that you are constantly being reminded of with these clock bells. It's also about past and future. I mean, Clarissa is looking at the old lady across the street through her windows. And for me, I feel like she's looking at her future, like she's going to grow old. She's going to be this woman. But then she's also looking backwards at her youth and her relationship with this girlfriend and this man that she was in love with but didn't marry. And he's back in town from India. I'm sorry if you can hear Mercy eating. She's being rather aggressive down there about it. Then you also have other people. You've got Septimus, who is dealing with shell shock, and time is almost constantly folding in on itself with him because he can be present and then he's pulled so rapidly back into the past, but and into his own terror and trauma. And it's I think this is a wonderful book for a prompt about time. Yes, Mrs. Dalloway, 100%. You could also probably throw Orlando in there. I think that Orlando would be a good fit as well, but we're going to go Mrs. Dalloway. And then the final prompt I find the hardest to answer. I don't know how to answer this question, so I'm going to kind of, I don't know, cheat an answer. I don't know. And that is beauty in catharsis. And so the definition of catharsis is the process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions. And you could say that reading something like Betty is very cathartic for me. I like a book that will make me have a good cry, that will make me just get real deep into my feels and have an emotion. You could say that a book like a fluffy romance is cathartic for me because I can escape into something that is just nice and happy and cheerful. But I kind of picked a broader topic, and I said, I'm saying, because right now what's cathartic for me in reading is reading books written by women about women and their madness, women and their mental health, women and their brains and their rages, and it's everything from like a mother thing where you're just unhinged to committed by on Meeting a Mad Woman by Susan Scanlon, which is more of a memoir about her time in a mental institution. I just am really interested in women processing, coping with, recognizing, dealing with, identifying their own mental health, but also looking at how medicine and has failed women in a lot of ways for their mental health, how this idea of hysteria and all of that. So it's a very complex thing that I've been finding a lot of catharsis in because I struggle with my own mental health, and having these other women, this like collective of women that I've never met before that are also struggling with things that I'm struggling with or that I have struggled with in the past is sort of cathartic. It feels like you're less alone. You feel like you're releasing your shame or your fears or your worries around like what is wrong with you. Or maybe it's just the world does this to us and we need to learn how to cope, and we can all cope together, and we can only do that if we all talk about it. So I really, really like that. And then I just picked 3 random books that kind of very loosely fit this idea that aren't so on the nose like Committed is, or maybe like The Yellow Wallpaper or some other things that are very much on the nose. So I have Magma, which is about a woman who is dealing with being in a very toxic, emotionally abusive relationship. And we see how that affects her emotionally and mentally and how she kind of gets out of it. I love that. Little Scratch is a stream of consciousness novel that you're following this woman through her day, but ultimately you realize that something has happened to her and she had a traumatic event in her past, and it's very difficult for her. I swear to God, Alfie is just sitting here farting. It is very difficult for her to keep that traumatic event from seeping into other areas of her life. By the end of the novel, you see how, despite all of her best efforts to shove it down, it always comes back up. And then Violets, I think this is a very interesting book, again, about trauma and how a woman can break. I really enjoyed this. It's translated from Korean, and this is really good. This is good. So I guess it's not just women and mental health, but it's also like women and trauma, but the two kind of go hand in hand. And it's not that it's cathartic, like I feel good, like happy catharsis. It's like cathartic in a way where you feel less alone. And that's the best answer I could come up with for this, other than saying like the same books all over again, because they're all books are sort of cathartic for me in some way. Anyway, I'm going to tag some people in the comments. Emily tagged so many people that I don't know who to tag anymore, but I will tag some people. And I can't wait to see more people do this tag. I haven't seen a lot of responses yet, but I think that's because this is actually a very hard one to get through. But I'm very glad because it made me think about my books in a very interesting way. And I enjoyed this process of picking these books. So yeah. I will tag people below. Feel free to do it if you'd like. If you've read any of these, please let me know in the comments. If you don't want to do the tag, but you just want to answer some of the questions, please feel free to answer them in the comments as well. It's always fun to see what people would say. I know not everybody has a booktube channel, so they might not want to answer the tag. But yeah, that's it. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want. Bye.
So just sit with me, talking to the night until the morning, building chemistry. I don't think I ever wanna go come closer next to me, trying to find another way to say this, but